The South African Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU, has rejected the rules of the second pot component of the two-component retirement system. The union says two-pot pension reform could have been progressive if it were not for the rules applicable to the second pot, which requires workers to assess seat only at retirement age. And this means a worker who is dismissed, retrenched or resigns will not have access to their pensions in lump sum until they become of retirement age. The bill, which was signed by President Cyril Ramaphosa, is sent to the Pension Funds Amendment Bill, which amends pension-related legislation to enable implementation of the recently legislated two-pot retirement system geared towards bolstering retirement savings. This dispensation gives members of retirement funds access to retirement savings without having to resign or cash out their entire pension funds. And for more on this, I am joined by the SAFTU spokesperson, Trevor Shaku from Gauteng. Good afternoon. Glad to have you join me.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us.
All right. Explain, the main reasons why the union is rejecting the two-pot retirement system. I mean, what are the concerns about the system that led to this decision?
Sure. We are not entirely rejecting the two-pot. We are rejecting the second pot, which is the retirement pot. So what actually is happening here is that the amendment to the pensions fund is going to create three pots for those who are already employees in the South African economy. So they've already accumulated the funds through pension contributions in the past years. Such particular contributions will be put into what we call the vested pot, which means that the old regulatory laws and standards will be applicable to the vested pot, meaning that if you get retrenched or if you are dismissed or you resign, you'll be able to access that money in the vested pot. But the new two pots, which are actually brought onto the sphere and would be the future of South Africa's pension system, will be the savings pot and the retirement pot. Now, all the new contributions from the September month of 2024 will be divided into two, into 33%, 33.33%, and 66.66%, which means 1/3 and 2/3. 1/3 will be taken and put into the savings pot, and then the 66.66% will be put into the retirement pot. In the savings pot, workers will be able to access those funds even before retirement, but they would be able to get those funds, at least at this current moment, up to 30,000. But of course, they will be able to access such funds entirely as the time progresses. But workers, unfortunately, will not be able, if they get dismissed, retrenched, or resigns, will not be able to access the 66.66% that is put in the retirement pot. And that is what we have a problem with. We reject the rules applicable to the retirement pot, but we think that the system is what we have been looking for, where workers can access portions of their pensions before they even go on retirement. The only problem is the rules that are applicable to the retirement.
Yeah, now you cited the loopholes, in these components, which you have, elaborated on. How would you want it reformed to better serve the interests of workers?
Sure. So this is how we actually have advised the government to do as the federation. We've said the government must take the existing regulations that are governing the old pension fund and transport it, or rather move it to regulate the retirement pot, because the current regime is very good. If you get dismissed, you can access your money in lump sum and cash it out and do whatever you want to do. If I'm dismissed today, I will be able to cash out my money. So we are saying to them, as a measure, they must change the rules applicable to the retirement pot and just transport, or rather move the rules that are currently governing the pension system to govern the retirement pot, so that at the time when you are resigning or at the time when you are dismissed or retrenched, you can be able to withdraw money out of your retirement pot. You can't wait. I mean, take, for instance, a young person who, say, is 29 years this year, or 25 years this year, and has only worked for 2 or 3 years. The vested pot will only contain a pension for those particular 2 years, and the rest of the amount will go into the retirement pot. Now, the problem is that into the retirement pot and the savings pot. Now, imagine 66% of such a person locked up somewhere in the retirement pot, and they have to wait until they reach the age of 60, the retirement age, to be able to access that. What if you are dismissed at the age of 30? Will you wait for 30 more years to access your money? Will you be poor whilst you have money locked up somewhere? We don't think that this makes any sense, and that is the reason why we want our government to change such particular rules. But of course, it makes sense to business, because business wants to use the 66.66% for speculative activities in the money markets and for investments, because the pension funds are made available to the private sector for them to be able to utilize them for investments. And as a result, this money is only going to be locked so that it can be accessed by the capitalists, whilst the working class who contribute to such particular funds are the ones who are suffering.
But then people have concerns as to if this new reform is implemented, like you have rightly, stated, there could be corruption or even mismanagement of funds, in this new system. So what can be done to guard against mismanagement?
Look, mismanagement exists anytime. Even in the old pension scheme, there is chances for mismanagement. There are chances for fraud. So those things are not conditional on the fact that there are new regulations and there's a new system that is put in place. What, of course, has to be done is for government to ensure that there is proper due diligence before dishing out this money, so that they can be able to ascertain that people who are withdrawing from the savings fund are indeed withdrawing on their own, or they are forced by someone. That's one. But two, we as trade unions, including government itself, have got again another responsibility of educating the workers to say, don't go and withdraw money from the savings pot if there's no need. I mean, if you don't have financial need and financial distress, why do you have to go to the savings pot and withdraw just because you can access it? So restraint must be exercised by individual workers, and it is our responsibility as the trade unions and government to educate workers that they should not just use such particular savings. But I think workers are also mature enough to understand that they're not going to withdraw money from their savings retirement pot only to spend it on alcohol. They will only go there to withdraw whenever there's a need. They will only go and withdraw whenever there's an emergency for financial obligations that they have to meet, either in their personal lives or in their families' lives. So we think that those are the things that ought to be done. Of course, scammers will come and scam. They've been there always.
I wish we had more time. Thank you so much for your time on the news. Trevor Shaku, SAFTU spokesperson. Many thanks indeed for your time.